Hello and welcome to the Scrapbook.com YouTube channel. My name is Lauren Taylor from Lauren Taylor Made, and I'm so excited to be here to share some really fun Valentine's Day themed products and a little bit that's not just for Valentine's Day, but we're going to use it for today's Valentine's Day card. The products that are inspiring today's card are this really fun build and layer food truck decorative die set. I also have the Heart Cherries 6x8 stenciled layer set, and I'm going to be using the Valentine pattern collection in A2 size for today's card. So I want to make sure that my food truck is going to fit on an A2 size card, and after doing some quick measuring and math in my head, I know that it's going to fit perfectly on an A2 card. So I'm going to go through this beautiful paper pack and decide on which papers I want to use. I actually had a really hard time narrowing down what papers I wanted to use, but I knew I wanted to do some stenciling on what's going to be the base die cut layer of my food truck. So I want to pick a paper that is more on the non-busy side, the more simple side, in order to do some stenciling that won't distract or create a more busy pattern. So I'm going to start with that pink striped paper all the way in the back of this paper pad, and I'm going to go ahead and just pull out one of these A2 sizes, as I know that my die cut is going to cut perfectly from this size piece of cardstock. This is a brand new die set, so that adhesive is real sticky, but I'm able to get off my dies really easily. Love how easy the dies are from Scrapbook.com, no snipping apart. Such a great die set. So what I really also like about this die set is that it not only cuts out the shape of the food truck, but it leaves indents or scored lines of where you're going to glue some of the other decorative items onto the food truck. But like I said, I want to start with some stenciling. So I'm going to open up my Heart Cherries layered stencil set, and I'm going to do some ink blending and creating my own stencil paste with Cloud Whip and pops of color. So I want to start with figuring out where the most cherries are going to show up on this food truck. I know that I'm going to be doing some layering, and so a lot of my stenciling is going to be more in the background, but I do want to make sure I get a lot of those cherries onto my pattern. So I am just referencing the back of my packaging to know where a good spot would be. Once I have an idea of where I want to stencil, I'm going to grab my mint tape and I'm going to use it to attach my cardstock of my die cut to the back side of my first stencil. So I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to start with the cherry stems first. I'm going to bring out Succulent and Cinnamon, both Scrapbook.com hybrid inks, and use my green blending brush. So this is my blending brush dedicated to green dye-based inks. And I'm going to blend on that succulent color through the stencil to cover the base of the food truck. Once I'm happy with how much green I have, I'm going to grab a smaller blending brush that I have for browns and add cinnamon. So I just want to add it to the stems, not the leaves. So I'm just going to use this smaller blending brush so I can get a little bit more detail and more control of where that ink is going to go. I love a good stencil reveal, so we'll see how the stems turned out. There was one little area that my brush went under my stencil, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. I don't really mind if there's some slight quote-unquote imperfections, just in an area that I get to embellish later on. So using this stencil as a guide to line up where my cherries are going to go, I go ahead and get that second stencil lined up. And then I'm grabbing one of my crafty cleanup cloths and some water to clean up the ink on my board. So now I'm going to make my stencil paste. So I'm starting with some Cloud Whip. I've had this for a while and I know it looks dry, but it's not. It's still going to work just fine. So I'm using my palette knife to get some of that Cloud Whip onto my glass mat, and I'm going to just use my palette knife to warm it up and get it back into a paste. Now it is a little bit of a thicker paste, so I'm going to grab some pops of colors to thin it out, but also to give it some really fun pink color. I'm using Cherry Pie, which I think is very fitting since I'm creating cherries on this background, and I'm going to use my palette knife to blend all of that together until I get this really nice pink stencil paste. Now I'm going to use my palette knife to pick it up and just apply it right onto my cardstock through the stencil. I have plenty to work with, so I'm going to put on a healthy layer of my Cloud Whip mix and then use my scraper, my all-purpose craft scraper, to smooth out that stencil paste. Here's the best stencil review or reveal. I love that pink on pink look. I think those heart cherries are so dang cute and they look so fun on this pink cardstock. So even if you weren't making a food truck and you wanted just to make your own background, I hope that brought you some inspiration today of how to use the heart cherry stencil. So now that I'm done getting all messy with mixed media, I brought out my craft mat so I can get to die cutting and assembling more of my pieces together. So we're going to step up this card even more by creating tiny little shakers onto my food truck. I have a piece of packaging that is left over from a Scrapbook.com order, and I'm going to use it to create little infinity shakers on these tiny little window pieces. This is definitely a step you don't have to do yourself, or maybe you want to create some shaker windows for your food truck. So this is just how I made my windows today by using some scrap packaging. I'm using my brand new scissors. They're ultra sharp and they're titanium. They're so great for cutting adhesive, but I'm using it to trim that piece of packaging so it's about a 1/4 inch wider on all 4 sides of this little window panel. Once I have that done, I'm going to cut the corners off at an angle, and that's just for gluing those little tabs on the back side of my window die cut so the corners don't get a little too thick with all of that packaging. I'm grabbing my 1/8 of an inch double-sided adhesive roll and I'm applying it to all 4 sides on the back side of one of my little food truck windows. I'm only going to pull off the tape or the release paper on the back of the tape using my Craft Pick Pro tool to help me get those off on 3 sides right now. I'm going to wait to lift the 4th one once I'm done adding my shaker bits on the inside. So I know it's kind of hard to see because I'm on a white mat right now, but I'm lining up the piece of cardstock that I've die cut for the window to be in the center of that little acetate pouch I'm making, and I'm folding over the flaps that I cut on those 3 sides. For my little shaker elements, I'm grabbing the Sweetheart Sprinklets, which are these red, white, and pink little clay hearts, and I'm dropping a few of those into my little shaker pouch that I've made. Once I'm happy with how many are in there, I'll go ahead and make sure they are laying flat. Again, just using my Craft Pick Pro tool to just make sure all those clay pieces are flush against the paper. And then I'll pull off that last piece of release tape or release paper from my tape and flip over that last flap. So I repeat that same process for my other windows. They're very tiny. I didn't get very many clay bits in them, but I just think it's a fun way to step up the food truck even more. So now that I'm still waiting for my stencil paste to dry, I'll go ahead and finish assembling more of these die cut pieces. I did all of my die cutting from the Valentine pattern paper pack except for the gray wheels. I did use a gray cardstock, and I am assembling the tires with the concentric circles and then added little hearts in the middle. I just followed the example on the die set. I thought it was so cute. And then I'm adhering those little tires or wheels into what will be the wheel well of my food truck. So I layered all those together for both tires. And now I'm going to move on to the door. So I originally die cut my door out of that really cute floral pattern. It's probably one of my favorites from the pattern paper pack. But when I assemble the truck, as you'll see as this video goes on, I just feel like the door gets lost. It feels like I'm putting too much busy on busy. So the pattern paper onto my stenciled food truck. So I'm going to change my mind last minute and make my door red, as you probably saw in the thumbnail for this video. But for now, we're going to pretend like that I love how this door is turning out. So I put the little shaker window with the hearts onto my door. Like I said, there's only 3 pieces in there, so it doesn't really do a whole lot of shaking, but I still think it looks really fun. Now I'm going to move on to the awning part of our food truck. So this is going to go over the window or the opening of the food truck where one would sell their food. And I really like how the awning is one large piece and then you add on 3 of the stripes. There's these little details at the bottom of the scallops for the awning, and that helps make sure that you know where those stripes that you're gluing on are intended to go. So I have all my pieces. I'm going to add the little door handle to the door, which again is not going to be relevant later on in the card, but for now it looks very cute. And now that I have all my pieces ready to go, everything's layered, I'm going to bring out that background. And look how cute those heart cherries have turned out. They look so fun, so soft. They almost look like cotton candy to me. So now I'm going to add my door to my food truck, which is going to be too early. I should glue down the kind of slotted detail at the bottom of the food truck. It's that stripe of paper at the top of my screen right now. It goes underneath the door, and I'm going to realize that later, but luckily it doesn't tear anything. Everything will work out, but I did glue down the door a little too soon. So make sure if you are wanting to replicate this, don't glue the door down first. Then I added my little shaker windows, so the front of the food truck as well as the kind of opening or the window where they would serve the food. I grabbed some 1/8 of an inch thin foam strips in the 1 millimeter thickness, and I'm adding that to my awning just to give it a little bit of dimension. Not too much, but just enough so it really pops off the food truck. I'm adhering that red stripe of cardstock to the top of my food truck, and here you can see I was able to peel up the door enough to be able to add this bottom decorative piece. So I'm just lining that up to the bottom edge of my food truck, and once that's in place, I can press my door right back down. I'm adding in my wheel wells and my tires. I think this design is just turning out really cute, but as you can see, the door just feels like it's getting lost, and I'm going to end up changing my mind later on. So I was going to attach this to an A2 card base. After all, I did all that measuring to make sure it would fit, but I thought it would be really fun to turn this into a shaped card. So not only have we stenciled our own background, our own pattern paper, we've turned all our windows into tiny little shakers, but now we're going to make it a shaped card. So I know there's a lot going on this Valentine food truck, but I hope at least one of these techniques inspires you today. You definitely don't need to do all 3 on a card, but I wanted to show you different ways to step up and elevate this adorable food truck die set. So I ran this through my die cutting machine, allowing the very top of the food truck to go past the fold of my A2 card base, so that way there would still be a fold on the card. As you can see, it cut through the Neenah Ultra Thick cardstock, the top layer, but it left an indent on the second layer. It didn't cut all the way through. You could add a shim to your die cutting sandwich if this happens to you, but I just grabbed my scissors and followed the edge of the impression of the die and cut it out. I also cut out 2 of the tires so that way I could get them to match on the back side of my card to match when I glue the food truck to the front of my card. So I'm just using my mint tape dispenser as a weight to be able to hold those 2 layers in place, and I'm gluing my tires to the inside of the card so they match what the overall height of my card will be. You could also glue them to the back. It doesn't really matter. I just wanted to make sure that I had tires to be stable and even as the front of my card will now be. I did originally add a piece of white cardstock to the back of my food truck just to give it some stability, but then I thought I would make this card base, so I didn't show that step because you don't need it to create this card. You can just glue down your panel, your food truck panel that you've created right to this card base. For the sentiment of this card, I die cut the sentiment So Sweet from that food truck die set out of some of the light pink pattern paper from the Valentine A2 paper pack, and it stayed inside my cardstock when I pulled it off my magic mat, so I'm just going to use it as a guide to be able to make sure my sentiment lines up perfectly. So I went ahead and used my glue press, my precision press that is actually filled with Artiste glue. I love this combo. It comes out perfectly out of the glue container. I literally just fill it right up with Artiste glue as I run out. And then I press it onto where I want it to go inside my card. And then I'm using the pokey part of my Craft Pick Pro tool to press those letters onto the card base, and that helped make sure my sentiment has even spacing. Here you can see I've replaced that door with a red door, and I like it so much more. I think it just really makes the red pop more on the card. You can see the sentiment on the inside and that my shape card stands up on the cute little tires. I know there was a lot on this card, but let me know in the comments which of the different techniques I showed today that you would put on your food truck. But I hope you had some fun with me today, and you could tag me in your future food truck creations. I would really love to see what you create. Thanks for having me here on the Scrapbook.com YouTube channel, where you find the best selection of products, free inspiration, fast to ship, where happiness is guaranteed. Bye!